Thank you all so much. I'll just afford you all the opportunity just to sit there and be comfortable, but I think we probably have a number of questions from the audience. If you do have a question, if you'll raise your hand, we can quickly bring a mic to you, which would help for everyone to be able to hear your questions. So let me just sort of open it up. Yes.
This is for Dr. Palaio. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Oh, it doesn't? Okay.
I grew up with two pronunciations.
What?
But, I grew up with two pronunciations, but we have a microphone. I mean, we have speakers, so we have lights. So when somebody's asking a question, we can't find you. Just wave to us. Thank you. Okay, hi.
There is an independent high school in the area here that sort of goes along with your theory of kids needing to sleep later as teens, and their day starts at 9:30. Do you think this is a good idea, and should other high schools follow suit?
Yeah, thank you for the question. There is data on this, and I'm sure they're basing it on published data. I think it was in Minnesota. They changed the school start times to start later, and that met with a lot of resistance from the community. But the data was that when you had the school start later, the kids got more sleep, and the school grades overall improved. The main resistance, though, in part was from the community. If you have a community where they share the buses, for example, if the high school starts later, then they got to pick up the junior high school or the elementary school kids earlier, and that throws off families. And also, if the high school starts later, they get out of school later, that impacts the after-school coaching, the sports activity, the part-time jobs. A lot of retail is based on adolescents working part-time. So there's a domino effect to this. But the data is that if the kids get more sleep by giving them a later start time, the kids will sleep more hours and tend to improve overall.
Other questions? Dr. Weintraub, I actually had a question as we're giving the mic to you about we're hearing a lot about sort of these Wii and other type of WII, kind of electronic games, which are almost kind of a video game enabling activity. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I can. A lot of people are actually doing studies looking at interactive video games as interventions for kids in terms of their weight as well, and have seen some positive effects from kids being active through a video game. So I think everything in moderation is an acceptable form. So if a child enjoys playing that and it's good for their health, then that's positive. On the flip side of it, I think we do want to, as I mentioned, decrease the media and video time and get kids to be more active and social. But in those, there are places where those games are social activity as well. So it's a balance. I usually am personally encouraging kids to get outside and be active rather than be active inside. But there's a lot of support for those games as well.
Take this question.
I was curious about whether if a child gets a sleep study and it's a child that's afraid to sleep alone, can a parent be there with them overnight, or how does that work?
The question about doing sleep studies on children, we expect the parent to spend the night with the child. Typically, the kids get the good bed and the parents get the rollaway, so that we have grumpy parents and the kids sleep much better. But we expect children to sleep with their parents. And what we tell them is, what I tell the kids is, we have the same rules at home, you have the same rules at the sleep clinic. If you can jump on the bed with your shoes on at home, you can jump on our bed with your shoes on also. However, we have one major exception. We have no bedtimes. Tell any 5 or 6-year-old you have no bedtimes. And tell them you can stay up as late as you like. That's called paradoxical intention. You tell them the opposite of what you want them to do. The kids maybe go to bed at 9 o'clock, 9:30. That night of the sleep lab, they go to bed at 10:30. Big deal. But they crash after that. So the easiest way to get a child to sleep is tell them that we don't want them to sleep, to stay up as late as they want. They eventually fall asleep. So it's not a problem.
And do they have the same experience as an adult at a sleep study, where they're being woken up a lot and have all the wires attached to them and all that? Children
overall sleep deeper than adults, and I think in a forum talking about community health issues, it's important to point out, we know some things about children's sleep that's important for all of you to know. For example, it's harder to wake up a sleeping child than an adult, and you cannot rely on, for example, smoke alarms to wake up a child. Current smoke alarms will not wake up a sleeping child in deep sleep. They'll wake up the adults, and the adults have to go get the kids up. Kids will sleep through smoke alarms. So knowing that it's harder to wake them up, we can actually do more things to the kids. But we use the same wires, the same sensors more or less for the children that we do for the adults. But the kids tolerate it overall better than the parents do. They're just less sensitive. They just sleep through a lot of what we do to them.
Other questions?
Recently, I was at grandma camp. My daughter requested some attention, sleep deprived, 10-week-old, nursing from 12 to 6 in the morning, 5-year-old not quite in school. So, Mom, he watches TV at 7 or whatever, but she limited it for an hour or so. And also said, this will pass. The baby will soon be sleep trained. And I thought, could you please tell me what sleep trained means? I know she was desperately tired, and I feared for all of our safety. We were in New York City, and that's not my style, but I learned quickly. So I'm very serious.
What is sleep training?
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
I'm sure some of the other parents have heard the concept. There's actually a cottage industry of sleep trainers out there. And they'll come to your home and they'll train your child to sleep. You know, we start off eating ad lib and sleeping ad lib. And the first actual thing you teach your child is to sleep when the parents sleep, right? If the parents are working the night shift and are sleeping in the daytime but working the night shift, you'd expect the child to adapt to their pattern. The children actually start sleeping ad lib, and the rhythm is imposed upon them by the outside world. You take an infant, you take a rat in a laboratory, you take an adult, and let them eat whenever they want, sleep whenever they want, work whenever they want. Their sleep rhythms get completely thrown off. Ultimately, our rhythms for sleep are imposed upon us by the outside world. And there's 4 variables that regulate our sleep: social interactions, exercise, light, and food. And if you manipulate those 4 variables, social interactions, exercise, light, and food, it spells self. That's how I remember it, self-correction. If you manipulate those 4 variables, you can get anybody to sleep at any time you want them to. Now, the issue is we have more and more 2-family households and not enough grandparents around. Classically, and I'm not just saying that, it's really true. When a mother comes to see me with her child, almost always, rarely is a grandparent available to them. Because many times the grandparent will take on the role of helping a child during the night. But now we usually have 2-income parents. They give up 1 income for 3 to 4 months, maybe if they're lucky, to take care of that infant. Now the mom wants to go back to sleep. Back to work, right? They want to go back to sleep too, but they want to go back to work, right? So how are they going to get this kid to sleep through the night on a schedule that fits their world? Or you have a situation where there were 2-family income, but now the mom's role is to get the kids to sleep through the night so it doesn't disturb the other person who's making the income. And I'm just generalizing. There are all kinds of families out there. But you have this issue of how to get this kid to sleep. And when the kid sleeps well, it's great. But when the kid is disturbing somebody's sleep, then the other members of the family get grumpy with each other. And whose turn is it to deal with the kid tonight? And it becomes this chore. And they no longer look forward to it. So there is this idea of teaching a child to sleep on a rhythm that you want. And you can impose it upon them. But remember, that child has no incentive to modify their sleep patterns for you. So then this whole issue of crying issue, do you let them cry or not? And we don't want our kids to cry necessarily. So moms will say, well, I don't want my kid to cry. I can't tolerate my child crying. See, this child has an 8-month-old. I can't tolerate my child crying. And I'll say, fine. When he's a toddler and he's 2 years old, and he wants to find out what happens when you stick a fork in a light socket, how much crying you will tolerate if you let him stick that fork in the light socket at least once, right? Or he wants to know what happens because he doesn't want to cross the street without holding hands, or not ride his, or not use his helmet when he rides his tricycle. So sleeping can be, if you want to impose a rhythm on a child, you got to train them to do that. But you don't have to necessarily do that. Okay, that's a cultural thing. There's a lot of cultural things involved with sleep. A bedroom is a cultural thing. Nobody's had the babies in separate caves 30,000 years ago. We share the same caves. Putting them in a crib is a cultural phenomenon. You can only do that if you can afford a crib in a separate bedroom. So this whole sleep training is often a cultural issue of trying to impose a rhythm on a child. Some people like it, some people don't.
There's probably some of us who are looking sleepier than others that can tell you more recently about sleep training if you want to talk afterward.
Yeah.